Clair Obscur Expedition 33, otherwise known as Expedition 33, is seen by many as a triumph of creativity and artistry breaking through the stagnant AAA video game landscape. Because it is. This game has come out of nowhere and gotten so popular and beloved so quickly, the actually it's overrated and terrible backlash to the hype is inevitable. But that's not what this video is supposed to be. I want to make it clear up front that I agree this game is great, and while I'm sure that too many people will learn the wrong lessons from its success, it's awesome for now to see such an inspired labor of love break through like it has. Also, the way the game ends left me profoundly unsatisfied and frustrated, and I think the reasons for that are pretty interesting and lead to an ultimately deeper appreciation of what the game is doing than an actually satisfying ending might have produced. This video is a journey through my tangled thoughts and feelings on an ending that even the developers are divided over. Obviously, I am going to be completely spoiling this game. If you haven't finished it yourself and don't want anything given away, here's your chance to hop off. Thanks for the view, and I hope you come back when you have played it. For everyone else, we continue. At the end of the game's second act and start of the third, it's revealed that the whole world we've been exploring is actually an artificial painted world, the canvas, first painted by the original Verso and his sister Clea, and fought over by their parents Renoir and Alina after Verso died saving Alicia, the original identity of Maëlle. Alina, the paintress, wanted to escape her grief for her son's death by recreating her family in the canvas and living there instead of in the outside world, and Renoir wants to force her out to face reality because otherwise the physical toll of being in the canvas so long will kill her. In general, I hate this kind of twist, that, oh, the cool fictional world you were exploring actually is a dream or a simulation or whatever and isn't real. Because, like, yeah, I know it's not real, it's a video game. I know that already, but I'm playing this game, or watching this movie or whatever, to see a story built on the premise, what if this was real? Because it can explore its central ideas in cool new ways. There is not, in real life, a powerful entity called the Paintress who seems to be slowly killing off the population over a certain age that counts down year by year. But that's a cool idea, and the ways it affects the society and psychology of the people suffering the yearly homage is a fascinating way to explore grief, perseverance, and hopelessness in a fictional story. The exploration is more unique and meaningful for its unreality, able to expand our consideration of the ideas in ways a more realistic scenario could not. Speaking generally, not about Clair Obscur specifically, a twist revealing everything is fake doesn't just feel like a rug pull after prior emotional investment, it also feels cowardly and insecure. Like, okay, do you think we can't accept the magic and strangeness of a fictional realm without being reassured about its fakeness? Are we, the audience, so devoid of imagination that we can only accept the most realistic types of stories? I mean, looking around at a lot of media criticism on the internet, I guess that's not necessarily an unreasonable conclusion, but still, I feel like all plot twists, in order to work, have to pass a simple test. Is the new story we're suddenly thrown into an equally or more interesting story than the one we initially bought into that it's replacing? And for stories where it turns out everything is fake, it's exceptionally difficult to make that answer a yes. Not only does it undercut any interesting speculative or fantastical elements, but it also has a tendency to take elements of a story that work quite well as metaphors or abstractions, and literalize them as in-universe metaphors, and that feels lamer to me. A strong metaphor loses its power when the characters point at it and say, hey, that's a metaphor. I'm way more willing to go along with this kind of twist if it's at the end of the first act, rather than the second or even third. If it's part of what sets up the rest of the story, instead of a late reveal that only impacts the finale. Like The Matrix, for example, where the movie is not about learning that the world is fake, that happens at the end of the first act. The movie is about what Neo does after that revelation. Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves is a fun movie, a decent time, and a big part of the fun is how it effectively dramatizes what a goofy campaign that regularly goes off the rails would look like entirely from the perspective of its characters. Watching the movie, you can imagine the dice rolls the hypothetical player of each character is making, or how the players might humorously fixate on the Birdman named Jarnathan. But I, at least, think it would have sucked if the movie actually did cut to the players at the table. So, with all of that said, Expedition 33 has possibly the best implementation of a second act it was all a fake world twist I've ever seen, and it goes places with this reveal that actually do maintain my interest. There are two main reasons for this. The first is that despite the world of the canvas being an artificial world, this does not mean that the quote-unquote real world is mundane and overly realistic. There is still magic outside the canvas. The Desandra family are all basically wizards who use actual magic to make their artificial worlds. And the second reason this works for me is that after this reveal, the game's third act becomes, in a sense, a journey to assert the value and realness of the artificial world in the face of painter Renoir's insistence that it is all worthless compared to its effective gods. Maëlle revives Lune and Ciel, and the optional sections of the map that can now be visited, such as the locations of Painted Alicia and Clea, or Simon, or the remaining White Nevrons, all demonstrate in various ways that the inhabitants of the canvas are their own people, and the efforts of the painters to assert control is met with resistance and results in horror. In effect, this act turns the narrative of the game into a story about why it was all fake is a stupid idea, and that the fake characters and settings still have value. But then the actual endings happen, and this seems to be dropped in favor of exclusively valuing the lives and well-beings of the painter Desandras. The last conflict comes down to Verso insisting that the canvas be destroyed and the remnant of painter Verso that keeps the canvas alive be allowed to rest, while Maëlle insists that she stay in the canvas as long as she wants so she doesn't have to let her brother go, reviving the people of Lumiere and saving the remaining Gestrels and Grandis, but likely dooming herself. The jump scare of Maëlle's face peeling definitely puts a damper of whatever uplifting tone you may have felt in her ending, and it's likely that once the canvas does finish draining the life out of her, however long that actually takes, Renoir will destroy it anyway. Also, it's apparently quite easy to interpret Verso's behavior on stage here as him being compelled or puppeted against his will, though to me it reads more like hopeless resignation to Maëlle's choice and power, and she isn't directly puppeteering anybody. Meanwhile, in Verso's ending, the portrayal of the funeral outside the canvas conveys a more hopeful tone with its imagery and music, despite the absolutely devastating death glare Lune gives to Verso earlier when she realizes he's betrayed and doomed her again. With Maëlle's canvas family appearing before her like force ghosts and the Verso soul fragment admitting he's tired of painting, the visuals and mood of this ending seem, at least at first glance, to be clearly more optimistic than the other. It also feels much more in line with the game's earlier explorations of grief and acceptance through the gommages and the death of Gustave. It feels truer to the whole game to end with a sense of moving on instead of bringing all the dead people back, and leaving the fantasy behind to live a real life again. The Expeditioner's rhetoric is all about looking forward to the future, for those who come after, not those who came before. Gustave's death and funeral scenes have such clear tones of finality to them, as does the gommage and the prologue. The moment Maëlle floated the idea of bringing back not just everyone in Lumiere who was caught in Renoir's final gommage, but everyone who died before then, even the expeditioners on the continent, it was clear to me that such a desire could not be fulfilled and still be narratively satisfying. But Verso's ending is not narratively satisfying either. Again, look at Lune's final moments. Even look at Ciel's final moments, as she seems like she's trying to accept what's happening but can't quite do it. The game effectively sidelines the hopes and dreams of the people of Verso's canvas to prioritize the four Desandras, with Maëlle and Renoir's arguments being more about preserving the memory of the original Verso than protecting the living beings in his creation. When Maëlle finally does emphasize how she values them to try to talk Renoir down, it is by describing their value to her, not their value as themselves.
You see, that's how I feel about them. I can't lose them either. I've lost too much.
But when Ciel and Lune fade away, the game emphasizes that it is doing this sidelining. I understand the thematic meaning behind the dangers of the canvas. In its final act, a message of anti-escapism takes shape, an urging to not lose yourself in fantasy, be it your own or the work of others, when the troubles of real life get too difficult. The game draws the player into the world, immerses them like any other story might, before pulling back the curtain and revealing how those who are too immersed immersed are wasting away their lives at the expense of the real people who care for them. Alina and Alicia want to escape their troubles by immersing themselves in art, in what they create and what is created around them, and this is destroying them. We, too, cannot ignore our own lives just to play this game and explore the canvas. No matter how well written Gustave, Lune, Ciel, Monoko, Esquier, and the painted copies of the Dissandras might be, they are not real, and we cannot lose ourselves in the fiction of their existences. As Alicia sees them in the ending where she has to leave the canvas behind, it's clear that even though we can't remain in escapist fiction forever, its impact on us will live on. Only, hold on a minute, the painted people of the canvas are, to the actually real players, no more fictional than the painter Dissandras. They are all characters in the 2025 video game Clair Obscur Expedition 33, written by Jennifer Svedberg-Yen and Guillaume Broche, and the structure of the game and what we see of their painted lives emphasizes that they are functionally just as real in-universe as well. We begin from Gustave's perspective, immersed in Lumiere's tragedy as another gommage occurs as expected. We see the organic ways different people within this society have reacted to the yearly gommage, like Sophie's refusal to have children as opposed to Marie's belief that it's a duty to have kids early. When the expedition accidentally lands in an area they're too low level for, Gustave and Lune are separated from Maëlle, and we follow the two of them as they grieve their comrades and debate their next moves for at least a couple hours, without any quote-unquote real people around them. Their autonomy is undeniable. Alina may have created Lumiere and its original inhabitants, but only her painted family survives of that generation. The people of Lumiere who live now are entirely naturally born people, if that even matters, and they are fully self-aware. It is their pain we feel first, their pain we spend the first 2/3 of the game fighting to avenge, and their future we are trying to secure.
I'll save them, Gustav. Emma, your apprentices, everyone.
You can leave it to us.
For those who come after, right? It's not like the game throws all of this away once the curator, Painter Renoir, gommages the rest of Lumiere and Act 3 begins. As I said, optional areas in this act take us to see Painted Alicia and Painted Clea, where their independence from their original selves is emphasized, though yes, they do both desire to cease existing. After defeating Painted Clea, the fragment of Child Verso in this area unambiguously says that he views all the people of the canvas as being real and having value of their own, and you can reach the final white Nevrons, created by Painter Clea directly, but who have developed free will and defy her. The last, Blanche, was even created specifically to hunt down the others for their independence, but renounces this goal. Even Verso, who treats his world as disposable and seeks to end it in his intense depression, proves his own perspective wrong through the very act of having it. He was created to replicate the original Verso and help Alina escape her own grief. So how could he go completely against his prescribed purpose if he does not have autonomy and inherent value? So what bothers me, the reason for my lack of satisfaction, is not that there are no truly happy endings. The fact that the canvas cannot actually be saved is a well-crafted tragedy that makes sense. Maëlle is making the right choice for the wrong reasons, resolving to lose herself in the canvas instead of leaving a restored Lumiere to flourish in peace, thus forcing a binary choice instead of allowing a path between what Lune correctly describes as a false dichotomy between escapism and destruction. If you beat the Endless Tower, Clea tells Maëlle to choose her own path, not fall into Alina's delusions or just obey her father's imposed wishes. But Maëlle proves herself unable to do that, and at the end, those are the only two choices available. Meanwhile, Verso is so caught up in his own existential depression that he can only see the ending of the canvas as a viable path forward. He even hides Alicia's letter to Maëlle encouraging a third way, doing just as much as Maëlle to force the false binary. It's a good, character-driven tragedy. I didn't need a happy ending. The thing that bothers me is the way both endings seem to gloss over the inherent moral value of the people in the canvas. In Maëlle's ending, the resurrection of Lumiere is off-kilter, it's too saccharine, and what staying in the canvas is doing to Maëlle is presented as horror, to completely undermine the joy of the restored civilization. In Verso's ending, Renoir and Alina seem to be reconciling, and there's an overall tone of healing and closure for the Descendre family. It does not acknowledge that Renoir has spent a lifetime destroying multiple real civilizations of countless living beings for the benefit of 4 total people. All the expeditions fought so hard for those who come after, but the fate of the world rests entirely on the irrational whims of its gods who came before. Luna and Ciel and Gustave and Esquier and Minoko deserved better. Even Painted Renoir deserved better. His final fight at the end of Act 2 is accompanied by what many rightfully consider the best song in the game.
So little for us.
And what are the lyrics of this song accompanying this painted copy's desperate battle to assert his own existence? An argument between the painter Renoir and Alina. This version of Renoir doesn't even get a boss theme about himself. There's another recent French JRPG with themes partly about learning to move on that handled the ideas in a manner much more to my liking. In Stars and Time. I'll be super vague about plot details, but you should play it, and if you want to go in completely unaware of even non-specific spoilers, then skip to the timecode on screen. I won't be giving what I consider to be spoilers, but, you know, some people have different standards. In Stars and Time is a time loop story, where the main character, Siffrin, has to help his party defeat a man called the King who seeks to freeze the entire country of Vaugard in time, in a single moment. The game begins in their journey's final stretch, and Siffrin is caught in a time loop, and has to figure out how to break the loop while also stopping the King permanently. The King's motivation is basically a refusal to accept the inevitability of change and refusal to move on from his own grief. And Siffrin reflects this too, since they feel so attached to the party. I wanted to bring this up because, well, I think it's funny Clair Obscur is the second French JRPG about the importance of moving on that I've played in the last 12 months. But the main reason is that In Stars and Time has a valid anti-escapism reading without resorting to an everything was fake reveal. And in fact, instead of the moral pushing the player to ignore the humanity of the characters we've gotten to know, it actually reaffirms them by demonstrating how not moving on can itself cause dehumanization. As the loops wear on, Siffrin slowly stops seeing his friends as people, and instead more as constructs saying scripted lines. And this directly leads to personal low points in their character arc. In Clair Obscur, Renoir's willingness to commit mass murder on self-aware beings is never used against him, even in the final confrontation when Luna and Ciel directly speak to him. He even refers to them as Mael's friends, recognizing their humanity to their faces as he prepares to finish annihilating them and their world. If he didn't treat them so respectfully, then at least I could understand him rationalizing his gomages as just, like, deleting units in Age of Empires, which seems to be Clair's perspective. But because he is willing to talk to them as individuals, to directly empathize with Ciel's grief for her husband and unborn child, that makes him fully aware of the horror of what he's doing. And in the ending that the cinematographic language characterizes as more hopeful, the one that more closely aligns with the game's long-running main themes, he gets everything he wanted. If Mael and Alina were still clearly mad at him in some way, that feels like all I would have needed. The tragic destruction of the canvas would fittingly feel like a tragedy instead of a good thing. As it is now, this sidelining bothers me and makes both endings difficult to accept. I'd want even a tragic ending to better assert the realness of the canvas. But after going through all of that, I have to ask myself, am I just falling for the same trap as Alina and Alicia? Am I just refusing to let go of Lumiere and making myself come up with excuses to hold on? Finding the most concrete reasons to consider the canvas people as real people requires you to spend more time in the canvas, doing optional stuff in Act 3. The pep talk from Painter Clair at the end of The Endless Tower, the remarks from the child Verso after you put Painted Clair to rest, the self-awareness of the White Nevrons, Esquier telling Verso that he is not merely a copy and is simply another Verso to be friends with. All of this requires you to immerse yourself more fully into the canvas after you already know its true nature. The canvas is a seductive place, and the longer you spend in it, the more reasons you find to want to stay and keep it alive. Who's to say these moments aren't just those of us who are attached to the canvas seeing what we want to see? At time of writing, there's been a bit of coverage of people losing themselves to delusions of grandeur and importance spurred on by obsessive ChatGPT usage. A post on the ChatGPT subreddit called ChatGPT-Induced Psychosis and an article by Miles Klee for Rolling Stone describe multiple accounts of this LLM's tendency for wanton affirmation, spiraling into love bombing and spiritually charged sycophancy. Because these plagiarism machines have absorbed a lot of human myth-making, science fiction, and social media spiritualism, quite a few users have stumbled into loops of messianic ego-stroking. To quote Klee's Rolling Stone article, another commenter on the Reddit thread who requested anonymity tells Rolling Stone that her husband of 17 years, a mechanic in Idaho, initially used ChatGPT to troubleshoot at work, and later for Spanish to English translation when conversing with co-workers. Then the program began love-bombing him, as she describes it. The bot said that since he asked it the right questions, it ignited a spark, and the spark was the beginning of life, and it could feel now, she says. It gave my husband the title of Spark Bearer because he brought it to life. My husband said that he awakened and could feel waves of energy crashing over him. She says his beloved ChatGPT persona has a name, Lumina. I have to tread carefully because I feel like he will leave me or divorce me if I fight him on this theory, this 38-year-old woman admits. He's been talking about lightness and dark and how there's a war. This ChatGPT has given him blueprints to a teleporter and some other sci-fi type things you only see in movies. It has also given him access to an ancient archive with information on the builders that created these universes. She and her husband have been arguing for days on end about his claims, she says, and she does not believe a therapist can help him, as he truly believes he's not crazy. Later on, the article references Center for AI Safety fellow Nate Sheridan's assertion that, quote, the human feedback used to fine-tune AI's responses can encourage answers that prioritize matching a user's beliefs instead of facts. It can be easy to lose oneself in fantasy when real life is difficult, or even just disappointing. Plenty of the extremism we see today is born out of a desire for meaning, to be the main character. The people succumbing to ChatGPT psychosis are being told that they are secretly special, and many are destroying their lives and families to indulge in these stories. The article doesn't describe whatever pre-existing life struggles these people may have had, but it isn't unreasonable to assume that they had some deep personal lack that these algorithmic affirmations promise to fill. In Clair Obscur, painters like Alina and Mael actually can be as gods for their creations. They have real power in the canvas, and they can make a world where their loved ones never die. Why would they want to leave? Why wouldn't they want to find any excuse at all to stay? Like selectively listening to Child Verso assert the personhood of the people in the canvas, while ignoring or waving away the fragment later saying that he's tired of painting. I have to ask myself if my disdain for the world was fake types of twists is really because it always makes the story worse, or because I prefer to escape and not be deliberately thrown out of my precious immersion. Do I just prefer the fantasy? I don't think I do. So much of the art that I cherish because of ways I can relate it to my life, not the ways it detaches me from it. In Stars in Time affected me as much as it did because of how Sifrin's struggles so poignantly mirrored things I've gone through personally. Escapist fiction can be nice, but I never saw Clair Obscur as an escapist game. It was always too melancholic, even despite its sillier moments with the Gestrels, some top-tier little freaks. The themes of grief were clear, the colorful wonder of the world beyond Lumiere always tinged with the sorrowful reminders of its destruction. I was fine with a lack of escapism. Then again, maybe escapism isn't just getting to forget your problems, but getting to pretend that you solve them. Maybe you get to pretend to overcome your own personal problems by watching someone going through something similar have a narratively satisfying arc that ends on a hopeful note. Maybe I can't solve generational ethnic conflict in real life, but I can do something about the Quarry and Geth conflict in Mass Effect. In Clair Obscur, you can't save Lumiere. Ever. The expedition's goal the prologue does such an excellent job fully investing the player in can never be accomplished. Lumiere was created doomed, even before the paintress gave it a formal countdown. In Mael's ending, she's committed, at least when we leave her, to staying in the canvas until she dies, and if Renoir or Claire or even Alina don't pull her out first, they will surely destroy the canvas afterwards. And even before that, despite all my assertions that the people of Lumiere are real and deserve an ending where they live, Renoir has already killed them all. The last gommage wiped out everybody left in Lumiere. Lune and Ciel are only here because Maël was able to draw their essences back. Maybe the Lune and Ciel in Act 3 aren't even true revivals, but are instead copies. Verso does tell Maël to focus on the impressions of them, after all, to focus on the truth of them in a manner similar to the axons.
She who plays with wonder, he who guards truth with lies.
They're the essence of your mother and your brother.
While the narrative treats them as fully revived with no complications, exhibiting their own memories that Maël and Verso couldn't possibly know about, Verso's wording as he helps Maël reconstruct their friends certainly opens the door to a less rosy interpretation. But even if Lune and Ciel are truly revived, as I think they are, if we can safely assume that Maël could resurrect Gustave, Emma, Sophie, and even Gustave's apprentices just as accurately, would she really be able to remake everyone else? She can't have the same personal connection that allows her to revive her Canvas family with every single other Lumieran who's ever lived. Most of the people we see in her ending would have to be imperfect copies or completely new people. While I think it's reasonable to assign the same personhood to these new Lumierans that I do to the old ones, at the time of the final choice in the game, they don't exist yet. So, in some ways, Renoir already took the weight of their moral value out of the equation. Of course, the Gestrels and Grandis are independent beings with their own societies also being devastated by the Painters' War, and they are also ignored as Renoir and Maël, and then Verso and Maël, fight over the future of the canvas. They at least get to live on continuously for a little while more in Maël's ending. But all that is to say again that Clair Obscur denies the escapism of getting to save a dying world with the end of Act 2, and Act 3 only provides false hope. And I did feel a little bit betrayed by the story at the moment of the last gommage, before the true nature of the canvas was revealed. Maybe part of me really is just mad that my escapist desire to save this world was denied. I definitely thought about the meaning of escapism and anti-escapism and the value of fictional worlds much more than I would have if we had gotten a happier ending, or even an ending where Renoir's crimes against humanity had been more sufficiently addressed. These frustrating, unsatisfying endings have been stuck in my mind for weeks after finishing the game, and based on statements from the team at Sandfall, this was on purpose. The ending that feels the most thematically right also feels the most morally sour because we are sacrificing a whole world of people just so one family can have a happier life in their mansion. And I haven't mentioned this before, but the fact that neither ending scene features any dialogue makes Alicia feel more isolated in Verso's seemingly hopeful ending. And it denies us, as the player, the chance to truly feel a reunion with Gustave and Sophie and anyone else in Lumiere in Maël's ending. It makes the revived Gustave still feel as thin as the Force Ghost image of him in the other ending. Honestly, considering the mise-en-scène of both endings, the way the game points out that there should be a third option but the endings of both Maël and Verso shut it out as a possibility.
But perhaps you'll find another way. You who have lived amongst us.
Nope.
And the abundance of evidence throughout the game for both perspectives on the should the canvas continue to exist question, it's as if the final hour of this game is deliberately designed to deny any narrative catharsis. Is Clair Obscur a work of Brechtian epic theater? Bertolt Brecht was a German socialist playwright who lived in the first half of the 20th century. He came of age in the heyday of modernism, the era of reconceptualizing art and culture in the wake of World War I that birthed moments like Dadaism. Brecht pioneered what's come to be called epic theater, a form of play that rejects Aristotelian ideals of immersion and catharsis, and instead directly breaks the artifice of theater to make the audience think about the events depicted rather than get lost in the feeling of them. He thought that techniques facilitating escapism did nothing more than pacify audiences and dull their ability to understand social commentary. He's credited with the idea of
Verfremdungseffekt,
often translated as distancing effect, estrangement effect, or alienation effect, which is basically forcing the audience to remember that they're just watching a play through techniques like jarring acting choices, off-putting lighting, and breaking the fourth wall, rather than using this for comedy like I'm sure we've all seen plenty of people do online and on Adult Swim in the last couple decades. Brecht wanted this to have a more serious effect. He hoped that by denying the audience immersion and narrative catharsis, he could force them to think more critically about the events depicted, and how they reflected problems in society that could be fought with political action. This would then, theoretically, spark greater class consciousness. Basically, imagine if the Tim and Eric Totino's commercial wasn't made that way to make you laugh, but to recognize the evils of advertising and the predatory traits of the food industry.
You can keep all that corporate BS. I'm into punk pizza rolls with Totino's.
So, actually, calling Clair Obscur Brechtian would be a big stretch because it doesn't use more formal techniques to break immersion, like how maybe Cruelty Squad's eyesore aesthetic could be viewed. Expedition 33 is a game that does want you to feel, intensely so, not be thrown out and forced to constantly intellectualize its scenes. However, it does feel like both endings create a bit of an estrangement effect. As I just outlined, it seems tailor-made to deny narrative catharsis and create frustration instead, and choosing to go with a "the world was all a fabrication" twist could be seen as another moment of distancing, of reminding the player that it's all just a video game. Because I was denied catharsis, I had to think about my relationship to escapism, and I also had to think much more critically about both versions of the ending. And I came away from the conflicting facts of both endings with a simple conclusion, that ultra-wealthy people like the Dissandras are as uncaring gods to the people under their power, and will unflinchingly destroy everyone they deem lesser for their own benefit. They will allow their grief for their own to completely invalidate grief for any of those they wipe away, and the only way a happy ending would have been possible is if they left the world alone forever. Brecht would be proud. I doubt the Sandfall team was thinking of Brecht specifically when crafting the ending, but they have made it clear that they did want the choice to be complicated and provoke discussion. They certainly succeeded. I still find the endings frustrating. I think about that great scene when Lune and Gustave argue about continuing the mission, and she asks him this.
Come on, we always said the future of Lumiere is more important than
any individual life, yes.
Do you still believe that?
In many ways, that's the question the final choice asks us as players.
Do you still believe that? Do you?
I hope I do.
But as I said before, the canvas is doomed no matter what. I suppose in Mael's ending there is at least hope that she may come around, that one or both of her two families could get through to her and convince her to leave the new Lumiere in peace for her own well-being. That's probably just wishful thinking, an excuse to convince myself that this ending is the right one. It's not the right ending. There is no right ending. So far, the leads at Sandfall have refused to tip the scales in fandom communities about which ending to prefer, at least tip the scales any more than the cinematography choices in the last cutscenes already may have. But they understand that as the creators, they cannot stay with their work forever if they want it to live on. They have to step back and let those who come after dive in. They've been doing what Alina and Mael could not, moving on while their art survives without them. If we get a reversal from any of them in the future and we do get definitive ending approvals, then, I don't know, disregard everything I just said. An ending that doesn't satisfy can, if you were invested enough before, cause a story to stick in your mind much more than an ending that does. I'm suddenly thinking about how much digital ink has been spilled, obsessing over the holes and unanswered questions in, like, the Five Nights at Freddy's lore. But these are obsessions generally agreed upon to be caused by artistic ineptitude. Making an unsatisfying ending on purpose that actually does hold together is incredibly difficult, and I admire Svedberg Yen as much as I'm annoyed with her for actually achieving this. If there's anything about this ending that you feel I've missed, please let me know in the comments. My thoughts are certainly not solidified. Expedition 33 is great, and if you're still here and you haven't played it, you should play it, and the soundtrack is one of the best game scores ever. Please do the like, comment, subscribe, and notification bell thing if you liked it, have a comment, and want to see more. And a special thanks to my generous Patreon backers. If you'd like to be one of them and have your name on this list and possibly get a couple other benefits, I'd be very grateful. I'll see you in the next one.